So I'm going to go over 5 and 6. I saw someone did this for their exit slip. I can't remember if this was, it might have actually been, I can't remember. Someone actually did these problems because I did switch them to like a little bit nicer problems, but the person that did do these questions did get them right from what I saw. But like for a question like number 5, you're going to group up your first two terms, leave a little bit of space when you complete your square. There's no coefficient with my x squared, so I'm ready to do that b over 2 squared part. That's called completing your square, like when you do this part. So we would have -3 over 2 squared, which is going to give us a decimal. Anytime you have an odd b, you're going to get a decimal, so it kind of can get a little bit messy. But if you square this, I don't know if you know, when you square fractions, you just square the top number and square the bottom number when you square like a fraction. So sorry, it's a little bit sloppy. That should be a 9 on top. So when we simplify this, so this would be plus 9/4, and then I'd have to do my handwriting. It's even worse than normal. So then if I add 9/4, I got to subtract it on the outside. So to factor this, like I said, whatever you get here, or not here, sorry. Whatever you get here, like before you square it, is what's going to be inside your binomial. So since it was a -3/2, I'm going to have a -3/2. And then -2 minus 9/4. I mean, you could put that in a calculator, or 9/4 is really 2.25. So that would be -4.25 if you want a decimal. So, and you could pull out the, like your vertex, I'll just write it up here. It'd be like 3/2 or 1.5, and then -4.25. But especially if you get decimals, because it's kind of hard to think, at least for me on the spot, like what would multiply the 9/4 and add up to -3. I mean, for me, that's not something I can easily think of off the top of my head. But one tip when you complete your square, like I said, whatever you get, like when you take your b over 2, is what you're going to have here. Like when you put it in, like when you're simplifying that trinomial. Let's look at another one. So number 6, we have a -1 in front. So when I write it, I'm going to pull out my -1. So that would make that a positive x squared and that a positive 9x. And then I'm just going to keep the -22 the same. I'm just pulling it out from the first two terms. So I can complete my square. So that would be 9 over 2 squared, or that would really be 81 over 4. Or if you want to just divide that out, that would be 20.25, because that's probably a little bit easier to write. So give myself a little bit more room. So this would be plus 20.25. So remember though, this, since I have a -1 in front, like this is really a -20.25, if that makes sense. So to undo that, I would add 20.25 to the outside. So if I simplify this, this would be -1 x, like squared. Like I said, whatever you get, like when you, like before you square it, like, so I mean, we had 9/2, I mean, or 4.5 if you want to write a decimal, but like whatever you get, like when you take your b over 2, like before you square it, is what you'll have here. And then -22 plus 20.25 would be -1.75. Check. Yep. So your vertex would be -4.5, -1.75. Questions 5 and 6 are rough because you get fractions, you get decimals. Honestly, a lot of times my advice, I mean, if you have to get it in vertex form, if you're trying to find your vertex, I mean, this is the way to go. But if you're just trying to, like, eventually we'll be solving quadratics. There are other methods, so sometimes you can avoid messy problems like this. You don't always have to complete the square. We'll see. Let's keep going. So if 5 and 6 were, I mean, if those were a little bit tricky, I get with the decimals, it probably makes it a little rough to look at. I mean, 7 and 8, I mean, there's not too much going on. I mean, 7, we will get decimals. 8, we will. Maybe I'll skip 7. I mean, you can look at the notes if you want. But I mean, there's honestly nothing too interesting going. But number 8 is not a bad one to look at. So you group up your first two terms. We got to get rid of this 4. So we got to like pull that out. Like if you pull it out, you're going to divide both parts by 4. So that would just be x squared minus 2x. I'm going to leave a little bit of space so I can complete the square. And since I don't have a c or a constant term, like I'm just not going to have anything on the outside to start with. So if you complete your square, you want to look at your new b, like after you pull out the coefficients. So this would be negative 2 over 2 squared, like b over 2 squared, looking at your new b, like once you have your x squared by itself. So that would really be negative 1 squared or 1. So I'm going to add 1. But remember, this isn't a 1. This is really a 4 if I distributed that 4. So to undo that 4, I'm going to subtract 4 on the outside. So if I simplify this, this would be 4x squared. And like I said, whatever you get after you simplify like the inside, like that negative 1 is what you'll have here. And then there's nothing to combine on the outside, so this minus 4 just comes down. So my vertex would be 1 comma negative 4. Oh, wait. And there's a mistake on my key for this one too. I'll have to fix that. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I'll double check. There's a couple things on the key from last year. I gotta fix them. I must have been rushing when I made this key or something, because problem 1 and problem 8 so far have mistakes. I'll double check the key and re-upload that. All right, we got 4 minutes. Let me see. Let's try and do it. Let me do a good one. I mean, 9 and 10 aren't the most exciting. I mean, you don't get decimals, they work out okay. Let me just show you one of these bottom ones. Like I said, kind of like the reason we're doing this is so like it's easier to graph. So a little bit short on time. I'll do number 12 because it's a little bit more to it than number 11. So I'll do the harder of the two. But you would want to group up your first two things. We got to pull out this negative 3. So I would divide both my x terms by that. So that would be x squared. That would turn into a plus 4x, leave a little bit of space. The minus 8 just comes along. We got to complete our square with our new b. So my 4. So 4 over 2 squared. That would be 2 squared or 4. So I add a 4. But remember, this isn't a 4, it's really a negative 12 if I distribute that negative 3. So I really subtracted 12 when I put that there. So to undo that, I would add 12. So if I simplify this, remember, whatever you get after you do b over 2 is what you'll have inside here. And then negative 8 plus 12 would be 4. So my vertex would be negative 2, 4. So if you want to graph, like I said, 7 points is probably too much. But you could get more x values, and then you could just plug this in to your original equation. So like, for example, I would be plugging in to this here. So like, just for sake of time, I mean, if you could plug them in if you want, but like you would get 1 here. So this would be 1. If you plug in 0, you'll just get negative 8. So these would be -8, and then you could plot your points, but it would look roughly like this. I think these go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that would be the very bottom. But it would look something kind of like this. So usually it's easier to graph from vertex form. So that's one advantage of converting it. It makes it easier to find your vertex. So pause.